FBI Director Kash Patel grilled over school shootings and stock trades. What you need to know.
Gentleman yielding. With that, we now recognize the gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here today. I have a couple of questions regarding a terrible shooting that occurred in Colorado, a state, as you may know, that I represent. You've testified previously about, I think, what you would describe as your efforts to provide more information regarding the investigation with respect to the horrific assassination of Mr. Kirk. And so, in that same vein, I'm hoping you can provide this committee and my constituents in Colorado with some clarity.
Absolutely.
I think, as my colleagues know, in Evergreen, Colorado, Jefferson County, a county that I proudly represent, at Evergreen High School, a shooter ultimately injured. 2 students were praying for their swift recovery. There's an article here from Colorado Public Radio. The title is, quote, FBI was already investigating an account that may have been linked to the Evergreen shooter. You're familiar with the circumstances generally, Director, regarding this terrible tragedy.
Yes.
So my understanding from the public reporting is that an organization reported to the FBI in July of this year regarding, just reading here from the article, that the FBI opened an assessment into a social media account user whose identity was unknown and who was discussing the planning of a mass shooting with threats nonspecific in nature. This is the FBI's statement to the press. And that the FBI continued to work this assessment investigation to identify the name and location of the user up until September 10th, 2025, which was the day of the tragedy. Can you provide us some clarity on what were the impediments to finding, the account user, and maybe describe in greater detail the FBI's work in that regard?
Generally speaking, yes, because I know even though the shooter's deceased, the investigation we're not done.
Sure.
And so the impediments to finding these individuals, and you highlight a great point. We had 2 huge tragedies in the span of days in this country. The school shooting in Evergreen, Colorado being one of them. And proactively going out onto these social media platforms, which are so large, is our biggest impediment. And we need to rely on the service providers. There's actual legislation, I can't remember the name of it, that's up for renewal, which will, and I think at the end of the month, which gives service providers the ability to report that information in from their end without liability. We need that to continue, because while the FBI has so many people and the police are great at doing it, there's just too many platforms to cover down on.
Well, I appreciate that, Director Patel, and I think we're certainly, I'm interested in continuing this conversation, because I think the reporting suggests that there's a pattern, and that ultimately we want to make sure that law enforcement is able to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening in the future. I have a question. It's not meant as a gotcha question, so it just frame it there. But it is in regards to some reporting around a periodic transaction report that you had filed earlier, this year. So this is in July, pursuant to the ethical obligations as a senior executive official. You remember filing that in July?
Yes.
Yeah, so in that report, as best as I can surmise, you disclosed that you divested $100,000 or more in a variety of different stocks, which I presume was pursuant to the ethics agreement that you negotiated with the Department of Justice. In that same report, there's a disclosure regarding purchases of 2 different transactions. So between $15,000 to $50,000 in a national coffee house chain, and between $50,000 to $100,000 in a semiconductor company on May 9th and May 12th. Are those transactions that you're doing personally, or are these through a stockbroker, or are these transactions that you're handling yourself?
So how they happen is I submit proposals under DOJ guidance to say, hey, I would like to trade this or that, and they run their review, and the FBI runs a review, and then they come back and say yes or no, and then I make the transaction.
Is there a reason that you decided to make the purchases into those 2 companies?
Generally speaking, before I got this job, I was, trading stocks, but not a lot, like most people, and I just follow certain industries, and I thought they would be a good investment.
So the reason why I ask, right, because you had divested in other companies, and I presume that wasn't because there were actual conflicts. It's just that you wanted to avoid an appearance of impropriety.
It was both.
Both, but not all of the companies were conflicts.
Whatever they make
divested from.
I don't make the call, they make the call.
Sure. Yeah. I guess my point would be, the reason why I ask this, why I said it's not a gotcha question, I have for years led an effort here in Congress to try to ban members of Congress, senior executive officials, from trading stocks. And it's bipartisan in nature. We're working really hard to get that done, Republicans and Democrats. And you can understand, I think, given your role, given the nature of the position that you hold as the leader of the largest law enforcement agency in our country, that divesting entirely, not doing day trading now, I think would be something that would be in the interest of the American people. So I just would hope you would consider that, and that moving forward, that perhaps not purchasing stocks in individual companies, I would think would be something that would be worth pursuing.
Gentleman's time is...
I'm happy to give the witness an opportunity to answer.
Thank you. I'll work with you on it.
Gentleman from...
Today, Representative Joe Neguse took center stage in a hearing that's drawing attention for two major reasons: the tragic school shooting in Evergreen, Colorado, and potential ethical questions surrounding FBI Director Kash Patel's personal investments. Let's unpack what happened and why it matters, not just for Colorado, but for the entire country. Neguse began by addressing the horrific shooting at Evergreen High School, where 2 students were injured. This is a tragedy that underscores the urgent need for law enforcement to stay ahead of potential threats. Neguse asked Director Patel to clarify the FBI's investigative efforts leading up to the shooting, referencing reports that the FBI had actually received a tip about a social media account linked to the shooter as far back as July 2025. Patel confirmed that an assessment had been opened, but he highlighted a key problem. The sheer scale of social media makes proactive monitoring almost impossible without cooperation from platform providers. He pointed out ongoing legislation that would allow companies to report concerning activity without liability, a necessary tool if law enforcement is going to prevent future tragedies. Neguse pressed the point, emphasizing that the public needs transparency and assurances that federal law enforcement can prevent attacks like the Evergreen shooting. He framed it as a broader issue. How can agencies protect Americans when technology is advancing faster than the laws and systems meant to safeguard us? The conversation then shifted to a different yet equally important topic: Director Patel's personal financial transactions. Neguse noted that Patel had filed a periodic transaction report disclosing trades in a national coffee chain and a semiconductor company. Patel explained that all transactions were pre-approved under DOJ guidance and vetted by the FBI, and that some divestments were made specifically to avoid conflicts of interest. Neguse used this as an opportunity to raise a critical point about ethics in government. He reminded the committee that he has long advocated for a ban on stock trading by senior officials, bipartisan in nature, because even the appearance of potential conflicts can erode public trust. He urged Patel to consider avoiding investments in individual companies going forward, emphasizing that complete divestment would better align with the public interest. This hearing highlights 2 key takeaways. First, preventing tragedies like the Evergreen shooting requires not just reactive law enforcement, but proactive cooperation from private platforms and clear, enforceable legislation. Second, the integrity of our federal leadership matters, and even carefully vetted trades by senior officials can raise concerns that deserve public scrutiny. The lesson for viewers is clear. Ethical governance and proactive public safety measures are 2 sides of the same coin. Americans expect their leaders to act responsibly, not just in words, but in deeds. Whether it's protecting students from violence or ensuring that officials avoid conflicts of interest that could compromise the public trust. If you want to stay informed about how Congress and federal agencies are addressing these critical issues, make sure you like and subscribe to Left Lens. We break down hearings, policies, and actions so you get a clear picture of what's happening in Washington and why it matters to you.